Welcome to Living the Empowered Life podcast. This is episode 66. And in today's episode, we are talking about self-care. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. Her name is Nikki. She is a self-care coach, and she's going to be telling us about her journey into the self-care field, and also as well, sharing with us her self-care journey, and also sharing with us some tips and things to help us on our journey to self-care. So I'm really happy and pleased to have her on the podcast today. If it is your first time listening in, welcome. I hope that this episode will be something of value to you. And to my continued listeners and supporters, thank you as always, guys, for listening in. Please be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. That is where this podcast, you can find this podcast. And also as well, share this with your friends, family, colleague, neighbors, whoever you feel needs a dose of living the empowered life. So, as I mentioned, Nikki is my guest today, and we're going to be talking about self-care. So we're going to just talk to Nikki and find out a bit more about her journey. First of all, welcome, Nikki, to the podcast.
Good morning, Yvonne. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. And I hope you're doing well.
Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me to speak on your podcast.
No worries.
An
Thank you,
honor.
Nikki, for agreeing to be my guest. So I've known Nikki for a number of years, probably about the last 10 years. We met through our charity non-profit work. Nikki's going to tell us a bit about her professional journey, and that is how I met her, through the work that she was doing. And Nikki has supported me in my non-profit Daughter Arise, doing various different things for the organization, which I'm really appreciative of. She also helps with the support group and runs sessions and workshops for the ladies that attend the support group. So I know she's going to bring a lot of value in what she shares today. So Nikki, tell us a little bit about your professional background.
I've had over 20 years experience of working with vulnerable families and young people who've experienced neglect and abuse. Also, I've worked with an organisation to support the non-abusing parent of sexually abused children, to help them to overcome the trauma of discovering that their child had been abused,
Yeah,
and supporting them to support their child so that so both the non-abusing parent and the child can recover. Within this work, it was quite harrowing, and it was very demanding and urgent.
yeah,
And I threw myself into the role because it was really, really important to me. People really needed that support. But unfortunately, I realized I wasn't really taking the time out to recharge or reset,
yeah.
particularly after the traumatizing cases. I was straight on to another case.
That must have been
This,
quite difficult, dealing with all those kind of traumatic cases and stuff. Did you have like
mm,
supervision or anything like that? I know you mentioned that you didn't take any time out. Did you have any other outlets?
I had supervision, but supervision was more about the workload and,
Okay.
yes, the work that I was doing to support the non-abusing parent, because I delivered training not just to the non-abusing parent to enable them to support their child in a positive way to help them to heal, but
Yeah.
also I trained staff members and volunteers to enable them to do the work and work with our families and young people. One thing I noticed about the training was that I encouraged the volunteers and staff members to self care, and it
Yeah.
was part of the training. And I actively would remind them when they started work, are you self caring? What are you doing? But I realized I wasn't doing that myself. And I think the reason being was I felt that I couldn't, because there wasn't that many organizations supporting the non abusing parent, and we were inundated, and
Yeah.
so many parents needed help, and I didn't feel that I could say no. And also, we were a small organization, and we relied on our volunteers, and we relied on our staff members to go over and above, and a lot of us did, because it was an issue that really touched our hearts. And we didn't feel that we could say no, but the consequence was that we were always on the go, 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 go. There was
Yeah.
no time really to reflect and really to look at what impact the role had on us. For a lot of us, there was a lot of stress, chronic stress. There was a lot of burnouts. I found myself working on an empty fuel tank, just working on fumes. I just couldn't stop. I couldn't stop because it was
Yeah.
just important and serious work. And
And how
then
long were you working like that for? How many years were you working at that kind of level of stress and at that pace?
I think a good 4 to 5 years of just constant nose to the ground, dealing with one traumatic case after another,
Yeah.
and supporting, not just really supporting our volunteers, but supporting the survivors as well.
So what was the turning point when you started to take your own self-care seriously?
I started to develop a range of autoimmune illnesses, one after another, just kept
Really?
coming. Didn't really understand it at the time. I didn't really understand that this was due to chronic, unrelenting stress and not allowing my system to rest. And it honestly, it just felt like my system just shut down, to be honest. And I struggled to get up in the morning. I was constantly tired. I struggled to find joy in my day because I was always tired and I was always stressed. And I kind of realized then when I was struggling with these autoimmune diseases, I needed to change. No one was going to do it for me. I had to take ownership and responsibility for my own self-care, my own mental, emotional, and physical well-being. It wasn't going to be done by anybody else but myself. And yeah, it was burning out that made me make the changes in my life. And then I got diagnosed with a really scary illness. And it was, now this is serious now because it was,
Yeah.
life and death. And I really needed to make that change. And I just realized that you can't push your body like that and your body sustain that level of activity and stress. You just can't do it. Something has to give. Normally, it's your body starts to break down.
So can you tell us some of the signs that you started to notice before you were you diagnosed with this autoimmune disease?
Yes, I was.
So what was some of the signs that you kind
Mm.
of, I know you mentioned about in the morning feeling really tired and struggling to get up. Were there any other signs leading up to it that made you think, okay, I need to go to the doctors?
Brain fog, forgetting things, short term memory was gone. Difficulty in getting my words out, I would struggle. Also, that unrelenting tiredness, even after a good night's sleep, I would
Yeah,
still wake up tired and just feel exhausted. Also, not being able to sleep because I was just really stressed. So, my body wouldn't shut down,
yeah,
had ongoing thoughts at night. And then when I did sleep, never really slept fully or deeply.
yeah,
Also, a lot of muscle pain, a lot of joint pains. I was walking with a walking stick because I struggled to walk properly. I couldn't climb stairs. My body was just always in pain. It felt inflamed, and that really, I think, that really had a knock-on effect on my social life as well because I was always in pain and I was always tired. So it was difficult then to want to go out and meet friends. It was difficult to make plans because I didn't know how I would feel. And also getting there, driving, I couldn't really drive anymore because it was just
yeah,
so painful. Even using London transport, there's loads of steps. Even stepping up to the train, I struggled with. And during rush hour,
yeah.
people don't want to give up their seat to you, even if you have a stick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's something that definitely does happen on London transport,
yeah,
this kind of selfishness with people, when they can see a person needs a seat, they don't get up.
yeah.
So with all these symptoms, you decided to go to the doctors.
I did. It took a really long time to get my diagnosis. It took years. And unfortunately, I found that maybe being a woman, I'm not sure. I kept going to the doctors and a lot of my symptoms were just dismissed. Yeah, I was given antibiotics or medication. There wasn't really an investigation to find out what was going on. Nobody asked me what was going on for you at work. Nobody asked me, were you
Yeah.
sleeping? It was only when by the grace of God, I went to a really good rheumatology team, and they started to ask me these questions like, how's your sleep? How's your pain levels? Where is the pain? And it was then discovered that I had fibromyalgia, and I hadn't had fibromyalgia for years. But because I wasn't looking after myself to get well, it just steadily got worse and worse and worse. And also, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome as well.
Yeah.
Um, also, digestive issues as well as psoriasis. There was it just kept coming and it just wasn't stopping. I always had asthma, but it was getting worse and worse and worse because I wasn't taking the time out to look after myself. When you're working like a Duracell bunny, you don't really see the connections, and I think that's why self-care is so important, why you have to stop and be still sometimes to figure out what is going on with you.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the medical professions don't always have the time or resources to do that,
Yeah.
and sometimes you've got to invest that time in your own health to find out what was going on. So I was really lucky to find a really good doctor, and he was
Yeah.
very supportive. And then I was referred to the homeopathic hospital in Great Ormond Street. They were amazing, and a lot of what they were saying to me was that you have so much stress in your life, and it wasn't just work stress. I was also looking after family members as well. There was
Yeah.
just so much going on. So much going on. I just didn't have enough time for myself, and they started to educate me on the importance of self-care, why it was important, and the need to look after self, and maybe not really rely on traditional medication.
Yeah.
That there was things that you could do,
So what were some of the things that they suggested?
mindfulness and meditation. So I did a few courses of mindfulness with them, and also with fibromyalgia. I did a pain management course, and part of that was teaching us about mindfulness. It was absolutely brilliant. At the time, I didn't know anything about mindfulness. I struggled to do it at first because, my mind was used to being busy. And with
Yeah.
mindfulness, you have to sit still in the moment and empty your mind. And it took a long time to perfect that,
Yeah.
and to shut my mind down, to stop
Yeah.
thinking about, okay, what do I know need to do at 2 o'clock today, and just be in the moment, because the importance of mindfulness is just being in the moment, being present in the moment, and it's a way that you can kind of reconnect not just with nature but yourself and your body and your
Yeah.
mind, and it's a way of just breathing and accepting things as they are. So mindfulness was amazing for me. It kind of really changed the way that I saw the world, and also my need to be busy and always doing things.
Yes. And I understand that because that's something I
Mm,
definitely do struggle with. I think for me, being present in the moment and sitting in the moment is actually in my prayer time. And even in
yeah.
my prayer time, in the morning when I get up and I spend my time in my Bible and my prayer time, just sitting still, lately that has been a bit of an issue. This morning I had a lovely prayer time because I just
Mm,
sat down,
mm,
had some music on in the background and just tried to just sit in a moment. So I think, what you said about mindfulness is something that is definitely powerful.
mm.
So the question I have for you is around how many, I have two questions here really. First, how many years ago since you did that course, those courses in mindfulness and everything, how long ago was that?
I started probably in 2010.
Yeah.
I always make sure I do one once a week because it's my own special time, where I'm not thinking about anything else. It's about me, and I'm giving
Yeah.
myself that time.
So was this experience that you had with, the mindfulness classes that you did through the homeopathic clinic that you mentioned, did that spark your next career interest into being a self-care coach. How did that actually come about?
That came about, I think, when I was delivering training to volunteers and staff members. I really acknowledged the importance of self-care. I knew it was important, even though at the time I wasn't practicing it myself. I could see that women, particularly women, struggled to self-care, struggled to take that time out for self, particularly mothers who felt guilty because, they always felt, they had to prioritize other people's needs before their
Yeah,
self. I realized this is a really big issue here. Why are we not looking after ourselves? Why are we give our all to other people, but we don't practice that kindness to ourselves? We don't give ourselves that compassion. Why? And I started to look into it more, started to research it, started talking to my friends and noticed that they too struggled to self-care.
yeah,
And I just felt, this is something that is really important for us to do, because by then I'd experienced my burnout quite a few
yeah,
times. And I just realized, and then, the penny had clicked. This is why I keep burning out, because I'm not self-care, and I'm not taking time out for myself. I'm not allowing my body to heal. And I could see the same pattern in so many other women, so many of my friends. And to be honest, some of my male friends too were doing the same thing. And it made me then question, why do we not feel able to take time out for ourselves? Why do we feel guilty to do that? A lot of women felt that it was a selfish thing to do. Um, and I know for me personally, culturally, um, you were seen as a good woman if you put everybody else before you,
yeah,
and there was an expectation to be there for everybody else,
yeah.
and you were made to feel guilty if you said, can I just do me for a minute? You were made to feel guilty, and I think because of that I struggled to say no. And I found in my social setting a lot of women were going through the same thing. There was just such a pressure to just do.
How then did you get to become a self-care coach? What type of things did you start to do to empower people around you who were also having an issue with self-care?
So all the things that I'd learned from my pain management course, from my mindfulness course, my meditation course, I started to send that information to friends. I started to speak to them about self-care, and they would listen and say, yeah, I know, but, and then I would become like a broken record. I wouldn't nag them, but I would just keep sending them the information about self-care. And sometimes I'd do breathing exercises with them. I do that with family members that were experiencing stress and anxiety. I will do breathing exercises with them as well, and I noticed that it made a difference. It helped people to deal with the big stresses and challenges in their lives. It helped them feel more in control, and I kind of realized that this is something that maybe I could help
Mm.
people with, empower them to wellness. I really just felt that people sometimes needed permission to look after themselves, as sad as it sounds, but that's what it kind of felt like, that it's okay to stop and be still and to do something nice for yourself. It's almost like people needed to hear, no, you can actually do that.
Yeah.
And I felt like, okay, maybe I'm the person to say that to them. And,
Mm.
luckily they listened, which was nice, But I just saw how much people value that, especially reminding people, um, you know, if they're having a bad day, what have you done to, feel good about yourself today?
Yeah.
Have you done something nice for yourself today? And just, constantly reminding people, why don't you do something nice for yourself today? Just something little. And it didn't have to be anything big, didn't have to
Yeah.
spend loads of money. It was just about celebrating self and showing a bit of kindness to self. And
Yeah.
I just saw people really valued this. And, really appreciated me saying this to them, and, even suggesting some things that they could do. People seem to take value in that.
And how did you then go on to develop it into becoming a self-care coach? What was the next step that you did to kind of establish yourself as a self-care coach, and how is that going?
I saw a lot of managers experiencing so much stress, so much stress. So I decided that within the role of supporting them, whether it's through training or capacity building, I would also build into that, supporting them to wellness.
So literally your journey with self-care then has been one of self-discovery and knowledge then
Yeah.
that is now
Yeah.
transcended towards other people. And from the sounds of things, obviously it sounds like people are really appreciative of your knowledge, your experience, and your expertise in this field, because I'm somebody that believes that the best experts are always the ones that have lived with the
Mm.
experience of going through certain things. um, and your life in what you have shown shows that you've obviously had a victory in this area of self-care.
Yeah.
So what kind of things do you suggest to the listeners that they can do to help with their self-care journey?
I think the most important thing about self-care is to see it as an act of self-love,
Yeah,
and see it as an act of self-compassion and kindness, and we are all deserving of that. So it doesn't really have to be big things. It doesn't have to be things that take up a lot of time. It could be things like journaling. It could be going for a walk. It could be things like, if you're into arts and craft. So for myself, I love crocheting. So I make things like this, like, hair pieces and
yeah,
things like that. But it just gives me a sense of peace and calm. It could be mindfulness, it could be breathing exercises. Some people, it's going to the gym or doing exercises. Myself, I love doing yoga and Pilates. It's where my mind completely shuts down and I slow down. And it's almost like I've been ironed, because I feel really energized and refreshed. No matter what has gone on before, no matter how stressful my day had been before, it kind of takes that stress out of it. And a tip I would say to anybody who is on that self-care journey is to maybe start by thinking, of the things that you enjoy,
yeah,
the people that you enjoy being around, and making a list of that, and then trying to work that into your day. I enjoy speaking to friends, and it could be once a day you speak to a friend and have a laugh and a giggle. Or
yeah.
it could be when you look at things that you enjoy. For you, and I know that you have a gift and a love for writing. So
Mhm.
maybe in your day you look at maybe either journaling or writing a piece, or for other people, they really appreciate cooking. Now, my
Yeah,
friend loves cooking, it really distresses her. And she loves the fact that whatever she makes, people really enjoy. That's her love language. But
yeah,
not only is she showing other people love, she's shown herself love.
yeah. So basically, self-love is really about self-investment and self-care, I should say.
Absolutely.
Self-care is self-investment, and that obviously
Yeah.
means that you have a love for self. And I
Yes.
think it's been interesting to hear you speak about this, because especially living in over here in the UK, where in London,
Mhm.
it's a very, very busy city.
Yeah.
Life is very, very busy. And it's easy to get caught up in shortchanging yourself when it comes to self-care, whether that is working long hours, being busy, not having, enough breaks and different things like that.
Mm,
So
absolutely.
it all kind of, and I've had that at times where I have felt, I wouldn't say burnt out, but I have felt exhausted.
Yeah.
And a classic example of this is this week. I've had a more relaxed week intentionally, because Friday I had to get in my master's degree assignment, and I'd already done 3 all-nighters last week, plus
Mhm.
80 hours study and working and looking after my family. So this week for me has been just about taking it more easy and listening to how you kind of detailed your journey about how you were working to the hilt all the time, which I didn't know actually. I didn't know all this background. So it's been interesting to hear you speak about it. But hearing how you worked yourself to the hilt for 4 or 5 years straight, and then having these symptoms, I think for me is also a warning for me as well, as somebody who is always on the go. How would you say that self-care fits into living an empowered life?
I think once you decide to self care, you're empowering yourself to better mental health, better emotional health, better physical health,
Yeah.
and improve wellness, And I think it's an empowering thing. Um, but also, it's a way to improve the way you deal with life stresses, the way you deal with challenges, and also dealing with things that you can't control. I
Yeah.
think if you're able to practice that self care and take time out, it changes the way that you respond to stress. It
Yeah.
changes the way that you respond to um, life's challenges. And it's a way of being that helps you to kind of slow down. And rather than react, you start to respond.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I think it's a very personal but empowering act of love for oneself.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
to live the empowered life, isn't it? It's about, if you're
mm,
stressed and you're burnt out, you're not living the empowered life.
exactly.
And just as you were talking, I was just thinking about living an empowered life. Really, you're the vehicle. You're the
Yeah,
vehicle that's going to live the empowered life. To be able to do new things, go after dreams, do things in life takes energy, takes time and stuff. And when you're stressed and burnt out and stuff, you are the vehicle that's supposed to live the empowered life, and you can't because of all
yeah,
these different things. And I think that's a really good point that you made about managing stress, managing life, because there are so many things in life that can stress you out. And it's very
yeah,
easy, as you said, to put yourself last when really
mm,
you should be putting yourself first. Obviously, we're talking about in the sense of self-care and self-love. To pour
yeah,
out, as you said, you can't pour out from an empty vessel. You have to be able to pour out from what you have. You have to have kind of a reserve. And if you're
yeah.
empty, then you can't do that.
I think self care also, in terms of empowerment, it kind of teaches us that we ourselves are important and we matter. Sometimes our caregivers are not able to give us the love that we deserve for whatever reason. So we're not shown how to love ourselves. But self care is a way to bring self love back into our lives.
Yes. And that's a perfect way to end actually, because yes, it is about that, isn't it? Um, Self-love is a whole nother subject for a lot of people. I think
Mm,
for some people, self-love and self-care is tied into the same thing. Some people don't feel that they're worthy of love and different things like that, so they don't really care about themselves. But as I said, that's a subject for another
mm,
episode. But as I finish this episode, do you have anything you want to say to the listeners, to encourage them on their journey to
mm.
self-care?
Seize the day, Cardium, seize the day and decide, make that decision and that commitment to yourself, to invest in yourself for the good of your own emotional, mental, and physical health.
So, Nikki, how can people reach you if they want to find out more about self-care? I know you've got a website in the works, or you've got things in the works in regards to setting up your website, but is there any way that people can reach you?
Yes, they can. If they're really interested in any self care coaching, they can contact me via you, if that's okay.
Yes, I can give
And
the email. Shall I put your email? Is
yeah,
that okay?
yeah, that's
Great.
perfect. And if you just put in the heading self care coaching, I'm happy to contact you, and we can do some sessions via Zoom and or phone if that's more convenient. But the most important thing is to think about this is an investment in yourself.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much for that, Nikki. So, listeners, thank you for listening in. I hope that this episode has been helpful to you to learn about self-care. And obviously, Nikki sharing her journey with us of her own self-care has been quite insightful for me, definitely. especially with everything I've shared about always being on the go. So, Nikki, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest on the podcast. And guys, don't forget you can follow me over on Instagram, YEME_empowerment, where I share loads of things to help you to live an empowered life. And I will leave links to all my contact details and different resources and services also in the show notes description box below, depending on where you're listening or watching this podcast episode from. So that is it for this episode. Until the next one, take care.